Here's a place where all of us can be safe. Our stories of transformation can be safe, and all the things we want to research are safe here. This is Safe Space with Cheyenne. I'm really excited you're here, and I hope you stick around for a while, because I've got a lot to show you before I leave Earth. I love you guys.
Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to the Safe Space, and welcome to my new Safe Space. Honestly, I haven't really caught anybody up on the flow of my life lately, because I've definitely been in hermit mode, but I moved to Kansas City, Missouri within like a 5-week span with my family. Super quick. We just got everything set up at the house. My studio is in place, and my first guest in my new safe space, her name is Lorna Gale. And before we even hit record, we were already just catching up and honestly just sharing true unconditional love, in my opinion, between two feminines trying to do their work and make the world a better place. But I was grateful to meet Lorna Gale a couple months ago on our mutual friend Brad Walsh's Empowerography sessions. We had a profound conversation about divine masculine, divine feminine in the modern world is probably the best way that I could say it. I really need to link this interview with you, because during this interview is where I met Lorna, and I was completely blown away with every word that came out of her mouth. And you're going to see it. If you're on YouTube, you're going to see how poised and how she breathes, and she knows what is about to come through her channel. And it is just, it's like watching someone in a meditative state channel to you, is how I consider talking to Lorna. But she has a list. I'm only going to name a couple. She is a award-winning speaker. She is a somatic sexologist. That is actually on my bucket list, which is why I'm so happy to be in friendship with you. And sex and spirit alchemist of the feminine-led life, Miss Lorna Gale. Thank you so much for coming on.
Cheyenne, it's truly a joy and an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. And I'm really excited about our conversation. I know as we've been messaging back and forth, it's kind of, I'm excited too. And here we are. So I'm really in joy at what will come out in our conversation today.
I really can't wait. I revisited your episode on Wonderful Morrison's podcast. And you actually helped me pack my house up, and I listened to the episode over and over because there was so much relatability in your story, even though we have completely different paths and lives. But a lot of the inner feminine conflict that you brought up in the present, whether I knew that I was struggling with it or I was going to struggle with it eventually, you gave me so many nuggets of gold just in that interview that when it was over, I was like, no, I want more. So I went and I just kept listening to the episode the whole time that I was packing up my house. And then I would go back and I would listen to our episode with all of us with Brad. And I'm always blown away at your posts, the way you speak, what you're really putting out into the collective. And as someone like you, who has also went through their own form of a spiritual awakening, it can look pretty odd to people in your life when you are waking up and acknowledging and finding like, oh, I don't know parts of myself. I don't know who I am. And now I'm supposed to go discover this while everybody else is getting ready for like the Super Bowl or Christmas or, all of the very worldly things that we are all extremely wrapped up in. So before you got into all of the amazing work that you're doing now, I'm curious of what your life was before you had your spiritual and your sexual awakening.
Wow, here's a bit of you're right, a zip back in time, that rewind. For me, I was married. I was married for 30 years, actually, to a beautiful man. We had 2 beautiful children. So before that, I was a wife and a mother. During the time of my girls going into elementary school, I was able to stay home with them, which I loved. And then when they were in elementary school, and I was a parent volunteer every week, one of the teachers said, oh, you should be a teacher. And I thought, oh, no, I couldn't do that. Oh, yeah. And so month after month, then it was just a matter of realizing, I wonder if I could. And a few weeks later, I was enrolled in my local university college and became a teacher. So became a teacher and taught in the school system for 8 years. Beautiful gift of a health crisis brought me literally and figuratively to my knees. That's where my spiritual journey really began. I had grown up in a religious home, a beautiful community. But I realized after a while that, wait a minute, there's a difference between a religious experience, religious upbringing, and a spiritual journey. And so my spiritual journey really started to happen. And in the gift of this health crisis, that's where I was really confronted with this. Confronted sometimes sounds negative, but I was invited into an experience of we're not human. We're not humans having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And so from there I went into energy work, teaching energy work, and then in there came my spiritual journey was continuing, but then my sexual awakening started to really come forward when my girls started to leave home, and it was time for me to really dive into some things.
What did it feel like at first when you had the awareness that you knew there was more to dig into than what we were really taught growing up? Because you have like the career checked off, you have the house, you have the husband, you have the kids, the daily life, the routine. I know as a mom, like I look at my daughter, she's getting ready to go to school, and I'm like, we're getting ready to go, like I'm getting ready to go to school again. That's how I picture it in my mind, even though I'm not. But I'm the one that has to set the parameters of that responsible schedule. So like where I am in my life right now, I'm like acknowledging fully like, hey, we're getting ready to go back to school with our kid, and then acknowledging like this is the time where I am in my life, but I still have, especially where I am on my journey, I'm definitely past my awakening point. But for those who are having those, like I want to say like positive, intuitive, intrusive thoughts about something greater than them happening all around them, but they're not awake to see it yet. What were those like little taps from the divine looking like?
Mm-hmm. And I love that question, that analogy, Cheyenne, in the sense of, we're sort of in the midst of it, but we don't know it. And the analogy that comes, and then I'll come back to those points for me. But that piece of, if you've heard the story of the frog, if you put a frog in cold water and slowly bring the water to boil, the frog will die. If you take a frog and toss it into boiling water, it will jump right out and live. And I realized that looking back, it was like being in that pot of water, not because it was this sense of any intention, for my death type thing, not that at all, as opposed to just being raised in something that you just, that's the way it is. So those 2 points were, I remember 5 years into my marriage, I'm going to back up a little bit. Into my marriage, I remember in a sexual way, when my husband and I were making love, there was this, we were familiar with the male trajectory of build, 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 and release. Well, my body didn't work that way. And it was build, 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 and nothing. So there was a sense of somehow there was something lacking, or that I just lost it. So it kind of, okay, give up. So, there was, and I think this is really familiar for a lot of women, for a lot of couples, perhaps, is that sense of the man being, okay, that put him into a refractory state, falls asleep, and the woman, and I was one of them, that just laid there and knowing there's something more. I can feel this in my body. There's so much more. I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to access it. But the tears would just run down my face night after night of just, I don't know what it is. So that was what I would say was that sense of awareness at that level. And then really beautiful 5 years into our marriage after this, time after time, my husband saying to me, beautiful words, why don't you find out what makes you feel good so you can tell me? And really wise words. But again, I was at a loss. I didn't know what made me feel good, because somewhere when I'm now looking back on it, that adage to save myself for marriage, it was that sense that, and it wasn't a cognitive thing. It was just taking it in. Well, if I'm supposed to save myself for something, then it means that my body, my sexuality belonged to my husband, belonged to the marriage. So this idea of exploring myself didn't even enter my mind. It was, and again, being a good Christian girl, is save yourself for marriage. And so I was a good girl and stayed in that. But when it came time to, being married, it wasn't as if all of a sudden, oh, everything's all roses and everything makes sense and fits together literally and figuratively. It was kind of like, no, I was lost. So I didn't know what made me feel good. And I didn't even know where to start to find out what makes me feel good. I had no idea.
I think this is such a relatable story, no matter where you are in a relationship as a woman, especially like I'm just speaking from the feminine collective alone of how girls are raised about sexuality and boys are raised about their sexuality. And I'm sure, across countries, planes, cultures, whatever you'd like to call it, it's all different. So I'm going to speak from my perspective and what I observed growing up and why I think it should be different and will be different, at least in our household. So I was the same like you. I definitely grew up in two households, but I had like church at one, and then I was like kind of able to explore churches in the other. But it definitely is known as a girl, you really don't want to go and mess around with anybody or anything unless you, as a woman, plan on dedicating your life to whoever you're going to be with. And I remember having issues with it and not knowing why. I think it was the possessiveness of the way that marriage looked from a Christian standpoint, where, like you said, my body was supposed to be saved for him, and almost like he would know what to do with it in some capacity. So growing up, I was definitely confused because I saw the way that guys were treated, not only about the education of their body when they came into like their masturbation stages. It was just seen as a joke, like, oh, if the boy's room's closed, give him privacy, don't pick up his socks off the ground, like little jokes about that. But for girls, when I think of a self-love practice, that was nothing that was ever taught. It's not like we were taught like it was bad, you're going to hell, but it was more like I was never taught that women were able to do that to themselves, or that we were capable of getting to know ourselves the way that honestly our counterparts have had since they were, in those developmental ages, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I remember, like I'm sure you were, being like, I have no idea what I like or what I want. And even going in and laying myself on a bed and my hand touching my body, I felt unsafe because I didn't know my body at all. And I felt ridiculous wanting to try to pleasure myself because I felt like it was just, wrong because of not being educated properly about it. And I know that there's so many women out there, whether they've gotten into the work or you're like, oh God, no, I would never do that. I think I would feel silly, like touching myself, so to speak. But there's so much more to unpack here with you about the empowerment that you feel when you're truly connected to your divine body and to your womb space. Because that was and still is one of the biggest things I'm working on is the womb healing and even the forgiving of misusing my power when I was younger for reasons, I'll write down in a journal and publish one day. But for you, when it first came into how do I explore my body? Is it okay to explore my body? Like, what subconscious programming did you have to go and start looking at and decide what to break to be able to be the person that you are today?
There were several things. When we talk about intimacy, there's this sense of somehow this idea of, as if there's people being intimate with each other, and we don't take into account this aspect of the intimacy with ourselves. So beautiful question. Interestingly, I could run around my home very, like with my husband and my girls, I could be naked there. But there was this sense of the shape of my body, the woman's body, that was, it again belonged to the marriage. So, the baggy clothes and, the turtlenecks and things like that. And I remember one of my times, my colleague in the teaching realm at school, she was doing sort of similar to a Tupperware party where you do clothes, weekender wear. And anyway, she was came to my home. I was hosting a party, and I was going to model some of the clothes, and she put on this she had me put on this yoga suit. It was a beautiful, flared pants, beautiful blue, a zipped up jacket. And she said, "Oh," she said, "that looks beautiful. Come and look." And I looked in the mirror, and I got nauseous because my curves were showing, and that had not been my way for, decades at that point. And I couldn't do it. And so to be able to be realizing how much there was a sense of shame about my body, that somebody else would see it. And I think that's, you have a sense of that as well. And I think there's a lot of women who we've been taught, somehow that who we are, we have to be a certain way, or else we are the temptation of and the downfall of men. And even going back to the Garden of Eden, there's this sense of, Eve's the one that took the apple, offered it here, and therefore, this separation from God and from humanity, this journey back to our salvation, and even the sense of shame, the fig leaves. And so to look at how, and again, in retrospect, and that's why I love, as a story unweaver, I love to look at our life journey as a story, to be able to see how all of these things have come into play along the way to really hide the naturalness, the divine aspect of who we are, to have this sense of there's something shameful about who we are. I remember another time when I was facilitating and teaching one of the energy wellness courses. I was roomed up with a woman from the States, and she had her doctorate in human sexuality. And I was sharing with her my disconnection from my body and my sexuality. And she said, "Well, tell you what, while we're in our hotel room for this time, why don't we just be naked?" And I just kind of, wow. She said, "We'll just carry on with our work we do on our computers, our practice, whatever we're doing." She said, "We'll just be naked." And it was literally, okay. And it took a while. First, in a hotel room, you got your 2 hotel beds, and, we're having a conversation. I would just look straight ahead. There was no way I was going to look, because she was naked. I was naked. And little by little, over the course of a few hours, I'd start to turn my head, and then eventually over the rest of the day, get up and start to walk around. And it got to the point where, and I just love the wisdom that she brought forward in this, because by the end of the 4th day, I was getting ready to go. It was time to go teach my class. And I had my hand on the doorknob, and then I realized, oh, I have to put clothes on. And it was just what a big shift that happened. But I had no awareness, like the frog. I had no awareness that that's how disconnected I was from my body, how deeply I was entrenched in this aspect of, or perception of shame of who I was. And then when it came time for when my girls left home, I just realized it's time for me to really start to explore and find out, who am I? What am I? What is this sexuality piece? So I took various courses, went to a few retreats, took some trainings. And there was a circle of women. We sat around. It was a weekend retreat. And in that first evening, as we told our stories of our yonis, of our beautiful temple, goddess temple, I was able to acknowledge for the first time ever that I am a sexual erotic being. I am. And it's not for anybody else. I am wholly here. And that was just like, wow, it was just an amazing experience. And then soon after that, I was able to connect in and find out about a course, which was actually the public version of the curriculum for the sexological bodywork training. And in that first assignment, it was actually to do a meditation. And I chose a mirror meditation. And mirrors have played a really powerful role for me in my journey. Some of us avoid mirrors, we'll use it for the makeup and stuff like that. But some people have a real issue around the mirror. For me, it's become critical and pivotal for me. In that case, I leaned against the side of my bed with the mirror propped up in front of me. Here I was naked. And I was supposed to be in this orgasmic practice. And I'm thinking, orgasmic, it's the last thing that I can think of. And so here I was, and So my practice was for every day for 7 days, at least a half an hour to do this meditation. And I looked in the mirror, and what started to come up was, this is gross. This is disgusting. And then self-loathing started to come up, and shame came up. And it even took me to existential shame, the shame that I could eat, that I even existed. So when you ask what came up in this journey of coming into this awakening piece, it took me down into those depths that I wasn't even aware that I was operating from. But once they were able to surface and come to light, then there was this instantaneous, this is so good, this is so pure, this is so right. And from there, it was like literally, it was a 180 degree from being grossed out at seeing a couple kissing in the Dairy Queen to talking with ease and freedom and joy about sexuality and eroticism. And it was like my girl said, who is this woman and what have you done with our mother? But it's created this space where it's opened up an area for us to talk and for them to have a new experience of themselves and how they move in the world as well. So we don't sometimes, like that frog, don't realize how much we're immersed in that. And what's actually fascinating as well, and Cheyenne, you talked about how, there's the feminine, the masculine, the female, and the male, the woman, the man, the different experiences that we have. And what I say as well is that we've all been taught there's certain parts of us we have to shut down, that it's not okay to feel. So the woman, it's be emotional because, you're a woman. But don't feel sexual, don't act sexual, because then you're going to be a slut. So there's a whole part that there's something wrong about our sexuality. And men are taught, well, yeah, you're a man, you're a sex machine, find out the conquest, how many women do you sleep with, and all of those pieces, but don't feel emotional. What are you, a wuss? Are you you being pussy whipped? Are you a sissy? You throw like a girl. And so very many ways, these parts of who we are, these natural aspects of our sexuality and our emotions, in one way or another, are shut down, and we all lose. We all lose individually, relationship-wise, society-wise. And so where I've come to is this place of, it's really about not only connecting into our own bodies and our own sexuality, but to realize that what we're seeing of outside of us, what perceived is, there's feminine, there's female, there's men, there's all of those pieces. It's kind of like, no, that's what we've been taught to do, is to look outside as if we're separate. And so it becomes this journey of coming back home into our own selves, into our own bodies, our own sexuality, and to realize that, it's coming back home, remembering that there's the feminine and the masculine are here within. And anytime that we start to feel a rejection of our feminine part, we get that opportunity to really reclaim and own that. And anytime we see something outside of us that is termed feminine or female that we judge, it's kind of, okay, can I own that within me? Have that fear of the masculine or the males around us. I need to protect, I need to defend. It's just kind of like, there's a part of me within that I'm rejecting. And so can I really come back home to myself in my wholeness?
Put it on repeat, Lorna. Put it on repeat. You bring up two of my favorite energies, which I've studied for, I think, probably since 2010, 2011. And I definitely wasn't aware or awake enough to understand it. But luckily, I wrote it all down in notebooks for my future self. And you can look through so many like ancient stories, love stories, whatever you want to call it, over time. And I bring this up to hopefully make up another point that I don't forget about. But the story of masculine and feminine energy trying to work together from appearing as opposite polarities, but ultimately working together and coming into union in a neutral state is seen all over the world in so much art, so much music, in everyday life. And to go through the healing process and to go as deep as you have to even understand, like, oh, I have a masculine in me. Oh, I have a feminine in me as well. Which one am I operating out of? Who did I shove in a closet and pretend doesn't exist? Now, I bring this up because in our interview on Brad's show, we talked, Wonderful pointed out very passionately that the business world and the world in general is made from the left brain, the reptilian, the builder, the doer, thinker, of course, but the non-feeler. And then, of course, we have the right brain, which is the feminine. It's the creation. It's the flow state. It's the nurturance. It's all the things that you kind of think about from a nurturing and erotic mother state. How many people out in the world do you think are still asleep to the concept that they have a feminine and a masculine in them to heal, no matter what they identify as their gender?
I would say the majority.
Yeah.
I think it's still absolutely the majority. And I look at it as by divine design, that it's that way by divine design. And again, coming back to the story analogy, is in this human experience, there's something that just wants to come here. We are not as it seems, and we are not as we think. And in a mirror, when we look at something, and I think probably each one of us, how many have used a mirror today, whether to do our hair, our teeth, our makeup, our clothes, whatever it is, we use a mirror. But when we look in a mirror, we're actually not seeing what is. We're seeing the opposite. We're seeing the reflection of. And so we've been living, if you will, in the mirror as if that is. So I love to be able to look at, again, the story of the Garden of Eden. Coming from a religious background, that was a really central piece, that somehow there was the fall of mankind. But if we look at it rather than this sense of, oh, they did something wrong, but they tapped into something. And the apple actually is an aphrodisiac. You bite into a juicy apple and it's kind of like, oh my goodness, it's orgasmic. So an apple is an aphrodisiac. Eve offered it to Adam, inviting him into this sexual erotic experience together. That is a very natural thing. And again, Audre Lorde's quote is, we tend to think of the erotic as a quick, tantalizing sexual arousal. I see the erotic as that deep life force energy that moves us in a fundamental way. So we've really never been disconnected from our divinity. It's what moves us. But if we look at this story, it's somehow this sense that, oh, she gives this apple, and now it's kind of like, oh, you've done wrong. Now we have to toil, and now you will have pain in childbirth. Just kind of like, no, she's inviting him into this experience of, come with me, come into this experience of intimacy with me. And in this Garden of Eden, in our divine state of being, it's whole and natural. But bring out the mirror, bring out the story, which creates a sense of, oh, well, to have a story, you always need challenge, you always need conflict, you always need antagonist, you always need somebody's journey. So let's make it that, oh, you just did something wrong, it's something bad. Now we have to have this, put the fig leaves on, have this shame and this journey to come back to God. And so that's why I say by divine design, because hidden in plain view is literally the reflection of what is here within. And so to be able to come back into this place of really connecting into our own bodies, our own sexuality, to feel. And it's no accident, no accident that our hands are the perfect length to reach to our genitals, to be able to touch, to be able to explore. And it's not that genitals are the only part of sexuality or eroticism. They are a part, and to be able to allow that to that body connection and to find out what is it that makes you feel good, and to find out. And then if there is a partner, then you can tell that partner. And one of the things as a part of my journey, well, is soon after my sexual awakening and this awareness, I was also shown another level of coming into things. And have you heard that part of, right? I don't know who the quote is, that the cave that you fear to enter is that holds the treasure, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, go into the fear, lean into it rather than going into it. And one of those places was that of the whole, people who wore black leather and had whips and chains, and that was so evil, so dark, so shameful, and to realize what in a part of my awakening, recognize that, oh, there's this part that steps into what I call the feminine leadership, is to be able to, a woman who not only knows what she wants, is willing to explore, but is also willing to express that and have somebody else be a part of that. One of the things I love about the BDSM world is it is based on consent. Is what do you want? It's entry into this consensual experience that isn't always what we're not really taught, that other than a defensive move. Oh, you have to have consent, or they didn't have consent, rather than what does consent feel like? What does consent feel like in the body? So when I get to work with people, it's let's start there. What does consent feel like? And often it means going back to childhood to remember, if you will, what consent felt like, to be able to say, no, I'm playing. I don't want to come and say goodbye to grandma, but where those layers of shame and guilt and being responsible for somebody else's emotional well-being, it's kind of like, no, all a part of the story. So as we come back home in, number one, to feel that I don't need a partner to feel pleasure. I don't need a partner to feel complete or to be complete. What is it like when I can really come back home and feel, to use my breath, my sound, and my movement to be alive in this body?
Beautiful. I could listen to you talk all day about all of the things that you're saying. But there was a few things that popped in my mind. There were several things that popped in my mind, but the most important one, it reminded me of Carl Jung's research about the anima and animus. And the masculine and feminine definition really corresponds to all of the feminine masculine union work as far as people coming into their own unity with God. But the one that I found familiar with researching masculine stuff is the desire and the drive that they have with that, very coached libido their whole lives. It talks about how the masculine is an overdrive of desire and lust for women because he denies his internal feminine. And only when the man, the masculine, fully, the word is escaping me right now, accepts his internal feminine and unifies his balanced masculine with his balanced feminine, then that is where he can also heal healthy in a sexual manner instead of feeling like he has to always be on the prowl and have a body count. And it says if the man or the masculine never overcomes, then he shall probably just basically be ruined by his desires his whole life, is what one of these stories was saying. And it's really profound when you go into Carl Jung's research about going through the psychology of the masculine and feminine in both of us, not just like the energy lines going through us. And with the feminine, it was the opposite, where she too had to bring her masculine in herself and heal herself. And before I got into divine feminine work, I was really into balancing the masculine and feminine in myself, which I am still to this day. But you know how it is when you're like heavy into the research and you're figuring out, like, is this for me? Am I going to embody this? Like, that's how I feel about a lot of the research that I did with the feminine and masculine polarities. Is even to say that they're polarities would be an illusion, right? But I guess we'll stick with what's physically presented to us. When you got into figuring out, like, did there ever come a point in your feminine journey where you're like, oh, I'm broken? I'm not broken in a bad way. I'm broken from an observant way. Like, I didn't realize I didn't consent to that. I didn't realize that that happened to me, or that was as traumatic of an experience now that I'm in the healing retrospection versus the, oh, this happened to me, I need to push it away to survive it.
There was, and in Tom Harper he's passed now, but he was a journalist in Toronto for decades. And his book, and I have it on my counter here, but he talks about healing touch. But he uses the word, and it's the way that I've used the word healing. Because sometimes when we think, we are broken, so we have to somehow, create these pieces. But it's the word means whole. So healing is not about putting the pieces together, but in the recognition and the remembering that we've been whole all along. And so a healing that happens is a remembering, it's a shedding of things, not of piecing things together. Although in the sense of piecing things together of how did it happen that I felt separate? How did it feel? How did it happen? What story element was put into play? What experience, what person, what scenario was put into play to make it seem as if I was separate from, or that this was going on? And that's where, I know I've had different traumas, sexual traumas along the way. And I remember one of my teachers and mentors, she said, you've had a lot of things along the way. So that it just keeps reinforcing. Some people it's one traumatic thing, and for some people it's a whole lot of things. Whatever it is, it has an impact on us. And for me, what's really important is that, just getting the tingles here. And the way I approach it and the way that I live it is that it's not about staying and being a victim to it. It's about how do we take all of these incredible experiences that have somehow played their role to incredibly hide the magnificence and the magnitude of who we are. And so these experiences are like stones that we are not buried. We're not buried by them, but we actually stack them up and we stand on them to rise in that remembrance of, oh, I know who I
am. That's powerful.
And what's really, when you talk about the feminine and the masculine, again, it's this, it has to be, make it seem like it's totally separate. Here's a female, here's a male. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, little by little, it's coming back into this part about, oh, there's feminine and masculine. And even the yin and the yang, we think yin is feminine, yang is masculine. But we have both yin and yang, if we want to use those terms. It's that the feminine is, we think about the feminine yin, which is that nurturing, that creative part. But there's also the yang, which is that destroyer, Kali the destroyer. No more of this, that righteous justice and the whole piece of, no, it's time for a new way of being. That's the yang feminine. And then we've got the yin with the yang masculine that we're used to, is that action, that doing. There's also the yin masculine we forget, which is the holding, that support. Like the testicles hold life itself. And so to be able to allow that all of this woven together creates this dynamic experience of what's it like to be in this human story, this human experience where how do you take life, all of that is, and pack it into something that's limited? That takes a whole lot of energy. And so to be able to allow for all that's there. And when we talk about feminine and masculine being together, and I don't even talk about it being in balance, I talk about it being harmony, because balance is static. There's no movement there. And I see life as very dynamic. So it's this harmony of how do those things move together in harmony. And then to be able to take, it was actually, I remember very clearly where I was sitting, where I had this spiritual awareness. So in my role as a pro dom, for years when I was a pro dom, and these men would come to me to be able to be in surrender to, what do you want? To have their will broken, to take that and to be able to follow what I would choose for them. What I realized, that's our spiritual journey, that dark night of the soul, that part where, in this case, here's the male and, being broken in and guided by into the feminine. And I realized that that's our journey. Is we think, here we've had the masculine, the male up high, and here's this, the feminine, this journey. And it's not just about our human experience, it's about our spiritual essence, that when we bring it into a right relationship, if you will, that we thought we were human, and the dark night of the soul and these various things that happen are that breaking away of, no, we're not these human forms. We are the spirit. And so we surrender, and I don't even say always surrender as a verb, but as a noun. Surrender happens in that awareness and that awakening to the realization that we are spirit, all of us. That's what illuminates us. That's what moves us. That's what breathes us. And so I say, not only is it the dichotomy or the polarity that's been created to create the story of what is hidden in sight, is that we are, no matter what body we're in. I have breasts and a vulva. Some people have a penis. But no matter what form we're in, that form is masculine, because form is masculine. Masculine is form. We had that life force inflows and moves us. That's the feminine. So hidden in plain sight in every one of us, here we are in our wholeness, in this masculine and feminine whole life experience as spirit beings.
It's a beautiful cosmic dance, but to hear someone that is very well spoken about the topic from a spirit and a science perspective, I could listen to you talk about this all day long. Like you're already rewiring my mind just on this interview. So I'm curious to get into your specialties as a somatic sexologist, and I want to know, as a woman, if I come to you, what services you can offer, and then as a masculine as well, if I came to you, what type of safe work could we do together to really explore ourselves?
Mm-hmm. And I love the title of your show, The Safe Space with Cheyenne. And that's exactly what I do, as you say, is creating those safe spaces for women. And for men, and even couples, because I work with couples as well, is I always start with finding out from that place of consent. And it goes beyond the sense of, oh, is it okay if I do this, or do you want me to do this? It's a felt consent, feel like in your body. So I always consent. And then often next is to actually go into a place of with couples, it's touch of consent, so they're touching back and forth. But for women and men, often it goes into PEP, personal erotic practice, and it's so much more than masturbation. Masturbation, actually, the word comes from the word shame, and so we're saying, no, we're going to move through that old story and really come back home to yourself. So PEP program is where I start, where they really start to connect in. And fascinating, a lot of people think, oh, it means that I'm going to have better sex. Oh, this is solo sex. What am I going to do with this? come home, come on home. And it often, if you have a partner, it will ripple out into there. And a lot of people think that when they do their PEP in this program, that it will show up in their sexual realm of things. And what they're not always aware of, it's going to ripple out into every area of our life, because that life force energy is what fills and fuels all of us from everywhere. And so I give an example of one woman who came to me. She was in her early 70s when she arrived to me. She actually wanted to shut down her sexuality. She found it was getting in the way because she didn't have a partner. And she said, I just want to get rid of this. And after our first session, she says, why would I ever want to get rid of this? So it became this journey of just deeply connecting in beyond her religious conditionings and the things that she had been taught of what women should be and where, et cetera, to the point where not only did she continue to feel alive, it showed up in her dance. Her dancing became even more alive as an artist, as a world-renowned artist. Her paintings became more prolific. They took on a new form and brought a whole new dynamic out for her. And she's now well into her 80s, and she keeps me posted every few months. She's with the love of her life, and just so happy. Yeah. So it's never too late. It's never too late. And for another woman who, for her, she thought it was going to be about her partner, and it showed up with her writing. Her writing became prolific. It showed up in how, as she says, I thought it was going to be about my sexuality. She said, it's everywhere. It shows up in everywhere in my life. So I often start there with women and with men. But again, going intuitively, I often, oh, no, this is where we need to start with you this time. And so I just really trust that process. And obviously, with their consent of, they agree to it so that we can journey this together. Women, when they arrive to me, it's often this sense of, I want to connect to my body and my sexuality. For men, it's often this sense of, I want to help me be the best that I can be for my partner, for my girlfriend, my wife. But there are also men who say, can you help me? I just want to be able to feel. I want to be able to feel when I'm doing in-person touches. I want to be able to feel what it's like to just feel, because they've been so shut down. It's not okay to feel. So they have to harden somehow. But there's that part inside that is crying to be touched, to feel emotionally, to feel physically. And then in my work through bondage as well, which is one of the things that I offer, it's an incredible way to allow people to be held in a safe space. And in my work, I put the blindfolds on, I put the ear pads on, and I tie them to my massage table. And again, by consent, because they're saying at one level and at multiple levels, I want to surrender. I want to feel. I want to be able to feel things that I have never felt before, that I am ready to feel. And recently, when I was training a woman, a practitioner, to be a bondage trainer. And in the reflection time after, when I had the male submissive come and share with her, what was that like to be, have a collar put on and say, I'm going to take you places you've never gone before, and I'm inviting you to feel as fully as you can. And he's saying yes. That he says, I was able to release traumas that I have held in, that I know have been from childhood. And so to be able to allow these pieces. So what do I offer? Online, there's online coaching that I do. I do have a space here that I work out of in person, that I can do some retreats at. I can do some one-on-one sessions in. They are really literally, whether it's through a massage perspective, through the coaching of the PEP, the touch of consent individually or with couples. It's really about bringing them back home to themselves so that they can feel, so they can express, be in this place of, I'm ready to explore something else. And one of the things that I'm actually, that came from my sexual awakening, when I had my sexual awakening, it was like all of a sudden I had these awarenesses that just kept coming to me about food, about the analogies of food and sex. Wow, we do that with food. What if we did sex that way? And it kept coming, and just even now I'm getting another round of them. And this was 15 years ago that they first started coming. And from that, there was a workshop, a body of work that came that I call Sex Like Food. And I'm getting ready to present, do some other work, some more rounds of that for people. What it really comes back into is looking at those ways that we've been taught how we do food and how we do sex. And what if we could weave those together? It would really create this space of doing sex and food in a whole new, empowered and embodied way.
Beautiful. I love everything you say, all the work that you're doing. I can't wait to just continuously watch all of the things that you do. As I told our mutual friend Brad, you are definitely my mentor when it comes to this work. And I look forward to working with you in the future. If you feel called to come on the show again, to teach, to speak, you are always welcome here in the Safe Space, Lorna.
Thank you. Thank you. And I welcome the opportunity to be back here as often as we are moved to do that, to continue to create this, a whole new realm of awareness for people. And fortunately, I've not reached this place where it's just, no, it's always in this place of what else is possible, what else is next. And so to be able to, for our listening audience, to be able to find out it's never too late, and what else is possible, and what is it when you listen and come from within, rather than, oh, what do I need to do? It's just kind of like, no, not the outside. It's coming from that inside like a fountain. It just flows. So to be able to support, yeah, and I so look forward to this continued journey together with you, Shai.
I love it. Please, my friends, find Lorna Gale's links below if anything that we have talked about has struck a nerve in any part of your mind, body, and soul. That's what these conversations are here for. So keep in mind that I always love those likes, subscriptions, and comments to keep this moving. This platform is a safe space for me, but it's also a safe space for you. So come on in, grab a fuzzy blanket, and we will see you on the next episode. Lorna Gale, again, I bow to you. Thank you for doing what you've done and illuminating the pathway behind you for women like me.
Thank you, Shai. It's an honor.
You're very welcome.